1,000 cameras watch your every move in today's Las Vegas, where faceless corporations charge $50 for resort fees, and a simple smile costs extra. But there was a time when the mob ran the strip. A handshake could buy you luxury. Workers could own homes, and the biggest gamble ever played wasn't at the roulette table, but in the law books of 1931. Official history says things are safer now. But if Vegas lost its soul along the way, what secrets did the old bosses know that kept the magic and the money flowing for everyone? Here's what made Las Vegas better when the mob ruled, starting with the deal that built paradise in the desert. Nevada lawmakers faced a bleak future in 1931. The Great Depression had emptied state coffers. Jobs were scarce, and Las Vegas was little more than a dusty railroad stop on the edge of nowhere. Then, with a single vote, the state rolled the dice, legalizing gambling just as the federal government broke ground on the Boulder Dam. Overnight, thousands of workers poured into southern Nevada, drawn by the promise of paychecks and the chance to build the world's largest concrete structure. These men worked brutal shifts in the desert heat, then flocked into town, pockets full of cash, and looking for a place to spend it. On Fremont Street, the Paradise Club became a magnet for off-shift dam builders. The air was thick with cigarette smoke, cheap whiskey, and the clatter of dice. Gambling was no longer a backroom secret, but the main attraction, and the city's first neon signs flickered to life above the clubs and card rooms. It wasn't just the workers who noticed. Syndicate money from Chicago and New York began arriving by train and car, looking to invest in this new legal vice. Mobsters brought expertise from the Prohibition era: how to move cash, how to keep the peace, and how to make sure the right palms were greased. The city's population, barely 5,000 at the time, swelled with newcomers chasing opportunity. Every paycheck spent at the tables fueled another bar, another hotel, another slot machine. With the law on their side and a steady flow of cash from both laborers and organized crime, Las Vegas transformed almost overnight from a forgotten outpost to a playground for risk-takers. The foundation was set, not just for a city, but for an entire way of life where fortune, vice, and ambition collided in the desert. The gamble of 1931 paid off bigger than anyone could have imagined, setting the stage for the high-stakes visions that would follow. Benjamin Bugsy Siegel arrived in Las Vegas with a vision bigger than the desert itself. Backed by Meyer Lansky and the East Coast Syndicate, Siegel set out to build a palace for gamblers and Hollywood stars, a place that would make every other casino look like a roadside diner. The Flamingo was his gamble. Construction costs spiraled out of control, ballooning to $6 million, an astronomical sum in 1946. Contractors complained about unpaid bills. Suppliers threatened to walk. Siegel pressed on, convinced that luxury would draw the world to his doorstep. The grand opening on December 26, 1946, was anything but grand. Torrential rain flooded the strip, unfinished rooms stood empty, and the casino floor was nearly deserted. High rollers stayed away, spooked by Siegel's reputation and the chaos behind the scenes. Instead of a glittering debut, the Flamingo's first night became a symbol of ambition gone sideways, muddy, half-built, and bleeding money. For months, the Flamingo hemorrhaged cash. Siegel's mob backers grew restless. Rumors swirled about missing funds and double dealing. Meyer Lansky tried to shield his old friend, but patience ran out. On June 20, 1947, Siegel was shot and killed in Beverly Hills, his murder still officially unsolved. The message was clear: in Mob Vegas, even visionaries answered to the bottom line. After Siegel's death, the Flamingo changed hands. Under Mo Sedway and Gus Greenbaum, both seasoned syndicate operators, the resort turned a profit within months. The Flamingo's success proved Siegel's idea right, even if he did not live to see it. From that point on, luxury was not just a dream, it was the new standard. The mob had shown it would risk everything for a shot at something spectacular, setting the tone for the wild, high-stakes city to come. On the casino floor in mob-run Vegas, order was enforced without a single camera in sight. Dealers, pit bosses, and security all worked under the silent watching of men whose reputations spoke louder than any surveillance system. A retired pit boss once put it simply: they did not need cameras because everyone knew who was watching. The message was clear: try to cheat, mouth off, or get rough with the staff, and you would disappear from the tables before your chips hit the felt. The discipline was instant and absolute. Most pit bosses were former enforcers, men who had learned their trade in back rooms and alleys, not boardrooms. They did not shout or threaten. Sometimes all it took was a nod to a floor man, and a troublemaker would be escorted out a side door, never to return. Stories circulated about cheaters who vanished after being caught marking cards or trying to palm chips. No police reports, no headlines, just a sudden absence. Regulars noticed, and newcomers learned fast. For the average guest or worker, this meant a sense of safety you could feel in your bones. Cocktail waitresses and dealers knew the bosses had their backs. Arguments rarely escalated, and if they did, they ended quietly and quickly. In a city where fortunes changed hands in minutes, the real power lay in the knowledge that someone was always watching, and the consequences for stepping out of line were swift and final. By the 1950s, the Culinary Workers Union Local 226 had become the backbone of the city's hospitality industry. Contracts hammered out in smoky back rooms delivered real results. Hotel maids, cooks, and bellhops earned wages that let them buy homes, send kids to college, and plan for retirement, luxuries out of reach for service workers in most American cities. Health insurance was not a gamble. It was part of the deal. Union members and their families had access to medical, dental, and vision care, all covered by employer contributions. Pensions grew with every year on the job, giving workers a path to a secure future. Seniority rules guaranteed fair shifts and protection from arbitrary firings. If a manager tried to play favorites or cut hours, the union stepped in. Arbitration and grievance procedures were not just words in a contract. They were tools that workers used and management respected. Even when disputes flared, the threat of a walkout or a call to the union boss usually brought casino owners to the table. The irony never escaped longtime residents. The same mobsters who ran the casinos also backed the unions that shielded workers from exploitation. In a city built on risk, union jobs offered a rare sense of security. Generations of families found stability in those paychecks and benefits, fueling the city's explosive growth and transforming Las Vegas into a true middle-class town. Frank Sinatra's tuxedo jacket would be tossed over a chair, Dean Martin's Scotch glass never seemed to empty, and Sammy Davis Jr. could turn a late-night crowd into his own private party. At the Sands in the 1950s and the 1960s, the Rat Pack didn't just perform, they held court. On any given night, a bellhop, a waitress, or a couple fresh off a bus from Des Moines could find themselves sitting just a few tables away from Hollywood royalty. The velvet rope was more suggestion than barrier. If you had a couple of bucks for a drink, you had a shot at catching Sinatra crooning "One for My Baby" in a smoky lounge at 2 in the morning. The official shows were packed, but it was the after-hours sets, the unannounced, anything-goes performances, that became legend. Regulars remember the feeling. No matter who you were, you belong. The mob bosses wanted a full house, not just for the whales, but for the everyday folks who filled the casino floor. In those moments, Las Vegas wasn't just a playground for the rich and famous. It was a city where anyone could feel like somebody, if only for a night. A room key at the Sands or the Flamingo once meant more than a bed to sleep in. From the moment guests stepped onto the casino floor, they were treated as if they owned the place. It didn't matter if you wore a suit or shorts. Bellhops greeted you by name. Dealers remembered your favorite game. And cocktail waitresses always seemed to have your drink before you even asked. The casinos handed out comps with a wink and a smile. Free steak dinners, show tickets, even sweets for a lucky streak or a friendly face. Regulars and newcomers alike could expect a round of drinks on the house, not just for the high rollers, but for anyone willing to play. Staff were trained to make every guest feel like a VIP, and the bosses insisted on it. The real secret was simple. Hospitality wasn't just a slogan, it was the business model. Profits from the gaming tables covered the cost, so the average visitor could live large without breaking the bank. In a city built on dreams, the promise was kept. For one night, anyone could feel like a king. Jimmy Hoffa's signature on a loan document could change the face of a city. In the late 1950s, the Teamsters Central States Pension Fund became the secret engine behind Las Vegas' construction boom. Banks wanted nothing to do with casinos. They were too risky, and there were too many rumors about organized crime. But the Teamsters, flush with dues from truck drivers across the country, were willing to roll the dice. Pension money poured into the desert, financing new resorts that would define the Strip for decades. The Stardust, the Riviera, the Dunes all rose with Teamsters cash. But it was the Tropicana that set a new standard. Built at a time when most Americans could not imagine a $15 million hotel, the Tropicana opened in 1957 as the most expensive and lavish resort in town. Life magazine called it the Tiffany of the Strip, and its two-story bungalows, sprawling casino, and high-end showroom made headlines across the country. The terms of these loans were generous on paper, with low interest and minimal oversight, but the real guarantees came from handshake deals and the promise of labor peace. Hoffa and his trustees funneled money to projects that had the right connections, often relying on recommendations from local syndicate figures. Construction crews worked without interruption, knowing that any labor dispute could be settled with a phone call. For casino owners, Teamsters money meant they could build bigger, faster, and flashier than ever before. For the mob, it was a win for both sides, new properties to skim, and a steady flow of cash to control behind the scenes. By the late 1970s, the Teamsters had invested nearly $250 million in Las Vegas casinos, almost a quarter of the fund's total assets. The skyline that dazzled tourists owed as much to union pensions as to mob ambition. And the risks taken with workers' retirement money built the empire that turned a dusty highway into the most famous street in America. Las Vegas didn't just build casinos, it built a city where regular people could thrive. Between 1950 and 1970, the population jumped from 24,000 to 125,000. That wasn't just gamblers and showgirls. It was families buying tract homes in brand new suburbs, kids riding bikes down quiet streets, and parents working steady jobs that came with real benefits. Oral histories from longtime residents describe neighborhoods where everyone knew the pit boss down the block, or the waitress who could get you a deal on a steak dinner. The city's growth wasn't an accident. It was the result of stable union jobs, affordable housing, and a sense that if you worked hard, you could move up. But there was something else too, a code that ran deeper than any employee handbook. Loyalty mattered. Paychecks arrived on time. If you kept your head down and did your job, you didn't have to worry about layoffs or getting stiffed. A former casino porter remembered, if you played by the rules, you never worried, and you always got your check. The unwritten rules shaped the way people treated each other, on and off the casino floor. Word spread fast if someone tried to cheat the system, but those who stuck with the team found doors opening for their kids and neighbors. In a city built on risk, the real gamble was whether you could trust the people around you. For a few decades, Las Vegas answered with a promise. Loyalty would be rewarded, and the city would take care of its own. Inside the Stardust's count room, bundles of cash vanished before ever hitting the books. Trusted insiders worked quietly, slipping tens of thousands in bills, into false bottom suitcases and paper bags. Each week, couriers, sometimes casino staff, and sometimes syndicate men, boarded commercial flights bound for Chicago, Kansas City, or Cleveland, carrying up to $15 million a year out of Las Vegas. FBI wiretaps later caught them discussing the timing, the weight of the bags, and which flights were safest. The money never saw a tax form, never reached the state. Instead, it fueled the perks that made Vegas famous: cheap rooms, free drinks, steak dinners for anyone willing to sit at a slot machine. For decades, the operation ran with clockwork precision, protected by silence and a web of loyalty. That secrecy cracked in 1950, when Senator Estes Kefauver's televised hearings pulled organized crime into the national spotlight. 30 million Americans watched as mobsters were grilled about their grip on Las Vegas. The city's mystique only grew, but so did federal scrutiny. By the late 1970s, FBI surveillance was everywhere, with microphones in air ducts and cameras hidden in ceiling tiles. Agents followed the cash, mapped the courier routes, and built cases that would topple the old order. Then came Howard Hughes, spending $300 million to buy the Desert Inn, the Sands, the Frontier, and the Landmark, washing the Strip with corporate money. The final blow landed in the 1980s, when Tony Spilotro's crew turned subtlety into spectacle, with robberies, murders, and headlines that even the mob could not ignore. The code of silence broke, and with it, the era of the skim faded into legend. What replaced it was safer, cleaner, and richer. But for many, the soul of Las Vegas left with the last suitcase of uncounted cash. Vegas today is safer, richer, and more surveilled than ever. Yet every year, over 40 million visitors still chase the old magic. As corporate profits rise and personal touch fades, the city's soul remains up for grabs. Sometimes the real gamble is not at the tables. It is what gets lost in the name of progress.